Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Festus and I make software development related videos. And in the spirit of keeping the knowledge you gain from this channel as broad as possible, today we are dipping our feet into the world of mobile development, hence why the title of today's video is Choosing a Programming Language for Mobile Development. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. I've decided to group today's tips into three categories, and the first category is you're just getting started with programming or software development. So if you're just getting started with programming or software development, regardless of whatever terminology you know it as, coding, programming, software development, I'll be using them interchangeably. If you've decided to get started in your journey being a programmer, you're being advised all over the internet, YouTube, wherever you go, blog posts and all. The first tip you will see, the major tip you will see, is that you should get started with Python because it's the easiest and faster programming language to learn first. While this is the case, it isn't always ideal. And the reason why I'm saying this is, if you've decided to learn mobile development, if you've decided to focus on mobile development, telling you to choose Python sounds as though you're traveling to Australia for a vacation and the pilot is flying you through the planet Neptune, then you get a transit and then fly back to Australia. As crazy and funny as that sounds, it's exactly the same thing. You're basically traveling to another world that is entirely different to come back to the country you intended to visit. Python is an awesome language and is used for a lot of things, but for mobile development, it is a no-go area. So if you want to choose mobile development and you want to get started directly with mobile development, the question you should ask yourself is, what kind of device do you want to target? The major ones would be Android phones and iOS, which is like the one you know as Apple phones. So either of which you choose, you wouldn't be going wrong. So with Android development, you're going to be using languages like Java or Kotlin, whereas with iOS, you'll be using either Objective-C or Swift. And there is a third one, which is modern, though it's been around for over a decade. The third one is cross-platform development. So with Android and iOS, you're basically building one particular solution that targets a particular platform, whereas with cross-platform, you're basically building a solution that can be deployed on either of these devices and several others if you choose to. So which one should you choose amongst the three of these? Now, I know what you're thinking. Cross-platform would be the fastest way to deploy apps since you just build once and push out for all. But it isn't ideal as a beginner, and that is simply because with cross-platform development, there is a lot going on, and it actually requires you to understand the basics of both Android and iOS devices for you to be able to build a cross-platform solution. And that is because while it is called cross-platform, it isn't actually complete. There are still things you would have to build separately, and you would need to understand how these particular platforms operate individually. So taking that out for you as a beginner, that leaves us with two, Android or iOS. So if you're going to choose either of these, you won't actually be going wrong. The one thing I would have to say is, if you're going for Android development, you would want to stick with Kotlin since it's a newer technology, it's newer and it's dominating in several parts of the world. If you're going to stick with iOS, you will have to stick with Swift because it's also newer and dominating in several parts of the world. Objective-C is really old. I'm not even sure if there are projects out there that still make use of this. So now we're left with Kotlin for Android and Swift for iOS. Now, which of these two should you pick? Now, regardless of wherever you live, regardless of whatever location you find yourself, both of these two would still be really huge because these are like the two biggest platforms and operating systems we use as consumers on the mobile front. The one thing I would like to add is, if you want to go for iOS development, it would make sense for you to have a MacBook. So if you don't have a MacBook, it's next to impossible to actually develop and test iOS applications, simply because you need some form of emulator and Xcode, I think it's called Xcode. Yeah, the IDE, the tool you need, the environment you need to build and test iOS applications. It works really smooth on MacBooks. I actually heard that these days you can use it on Windows, but it's not really like an ideal solution since it's not the way it was meant to be. So if you can afford to get a MacBook from the get-go, then maybe you could consider this path. But if you can't, then there's nothing wrong with sticking with Android development. The second category we're going to be talking about here is you are already a developer. So when I'm talking about you being a developer, I mean you're not a mobile developer. You are like, say, a web developer, or maybe even a data scientist or database administrator or database developer, whatever. Say you're already dealing with code on your day-to-day activities, say at your job or your freelancing journey. So if you want to learn mobile development and you already have an idea of what programming is, or you're already building something, it would make sense for you to go with something that, pretty much is similar to what you're used to, be it syntax-wise or the language itself. So say you're a web developer working with React on the front end, it would make sense for you to learn something like React Native, simply because React Native is simply React. There's actually nothing new going on except the fact that you're moving to a different, I wouldn't know if I should call it a framework or a library, but you get the whole idea. The transition is way smoother because you already know React. On the other hand, if you know something like, say, Angular, well, it's Ionic. With Ionic, you can code with Angular, and it's pretty much the same thing. More about this will be coming on my channel because I intend to make tutorials about Ionic because I'm familiar with it. If you also know, say, something like Java, say you're a backend developer and you already know Java, well, it makes sense for you to learn Flutter, because then again, Flutter is a strongly typed language and it will be easier for you to pick up the basics of, the syntax of the language and get going, get up and running. So moving on to the last category. The last category, of course, would be someone who is already familiar with mobile development. So you're a mobile developer, you're thinking of choosing another language. So if you're a mobile developer and you're thinking about choosing another language, the one thing I would like to say is it really depends on what you're going for. So say you're already an Android developer and you want to add in iOS development, there are two ways you can go about this, or even the other way around, vice versa. You can either switch to the other one, say moving from Kotlin to Swift, or from Swift to Kotlin, or even going for a cross-platform solution. In my honest opinion, I think if you already know how to build one, it would make sense for you to pick a language that allows you to build cross-platform, because at the end of the day, you're already a master of one. That would make it easy for you to build a cross-platform solution using languages like Flutter, which is written in Dart, say React Native, or even Ionic. And like I've said again, everything that I've been saying here, from the first category, second, third, it really depends on what you want, where you live, the location you live, the job roles out there and the requirements. And lastly, the money you have in terms of finances. What can you afford? Can you afford to buy a MacBook? Do you have a decent computer that can, power up the environments you need for any of this stuff? Are you a developer already, or are you getting started? So these are the questions you need to ask yourself in order to pick the proper language to get started with your mobile development journey. And I believe I've answered your question on what language to choose in order to get started with mobile development. Thank you for watching this video, guys. See you next week.